Welcome to Recombination Nation. Today I have what might be a controversial guest, but I think will be a fascinating one. I'm talking to Malcolm Collins from you might have seen his podcast channel where he regularly has conversations with his wife about all sorts of aspects of culture and technology and genetics and evolution and demographics and all of the kind of stuff that I find extremely fascinating. And why I have enormous respect for him. He's not just a thinker and he's not just a doer. He's somebody who has put his own bloodline on the line, who is putting all of his chips on the table. And that might sound like a bold claim, but I think everybody does this through their life decisions. And many people today are choosing personal extinction without probably fully realizing that they're going down that path. Anyway, so that's my impression of Malcolm. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview about who you are and how you ended up in this
Well,
unusual position in life?
so your audience, if I'm giving it for your audience rather than the general public or whatever, right? Because they all know that. When I was younger, I was really obsessed with genetic engineering and the idea of what the future could mean for like the first job I wanted to do. And if my parents are around, they tell you this because I was obsessed with it, was being a botanist. And then it was being a genetic engineer. Which I think is very in line with sort of what your audience is interested in. But as time went on, I ended up getting a specialization because I asked myself, I mean, I remember where I went into this. I go, what's the next big technology that's going to change everything? And I thought in high school it'd be brain computer interface, like Neuralink stuff. So I got a degree in that, right? And I worked in the field. And I was like, oh my God, this technology is like super far behind where I expected it to be. It seems to be dealing with some pretty systemic hurdles. So then I was like, well, shoot, I'll just get a good degree. I ended up going to Stanford for my MBA and then just like I'll do MBA, private equity, venture capital stuff. And I did that. And in the meantime, I was writing books. And they've done very well. And I sort of became known as the head of the pronatalist movement, which is what people probably know me for, is the birth rate guy, the billionaires who are trying to replace you. I am not a billionaire, but I don't know. Journalists say that, and I love it because it makes me feel like I don't. Why even make it? The only reason you want to be a billionaire is so you can flex it. Like I get to flex it being a billionaire without the hard work, right? They want to paint me that way, or the elite couple trying to replace mankind or something. So anyway, and I think if you're looking at this from the low IQ perspective, right, it is. And people look at the prenatalist movement, it's trying to bring attention to fertility collapse. It's trying to bring attention to social security collapse. It's trying to bring attention to, mass cultural and ethnic extinction. But the reality is if you actually hang out with the movement, that's not what it's about. Nobody in the movement thinks that this is something we can stop. Like, we're not like the environmentalist movement where like people pretend they can stop global warming. And like, if you're familiar with the statistics at all, you're like, oh, we are so like there is no way. Like, we have been trying to get governments on board with this for like the past 15 years and it has not worked.
Hmm.
One of my favorite statistics in relation to this was the Paris Climate Accords in terms of carbon reduction. And the year that COVID happened and nobody commuted to work and nobody flew and everything like that year we hit the incremental carbon reduction that we were supposed to need to every year past that for 1 year. And I was like, oh, so this is like a joke, right? But with the pronatalist movement, everybody knows we're not going to fix things in time. And if you look at Europe, most of their economies go bankrupt, like social security wise, within the next few decades. And nobody defunds social security. So we're talking, they're going to defund welfare first. They're going to defund Medicaid first. The whole thing just falls apart. Unless AI acts as the literal Deus Ex Machina, but we can get into why that probably won't happen. So anyway, what we're actually focused on as a movement is we're sort of like a collection of people who's like, okay, I'm willing to try to have a lot of kids and create a culture for those kids that has a lot of kids that they'll hopefully pass on to their kids. I'm willing to work with you, all of these groups that are very different from us. What does the future of humanity look like when we're the only ones left?
Mm.
And people can be like, oh, what about all these very low education groups, all these very low, and I'm not saying this is due to like ethnicity, genetics, or I'm just being like, an easy way to be high fertility is to be very low education, to have a highly xenophobic view of outsiders, and to treat women like slaves, like breeding, this happens within some Muslim groups, within some Christian groups, within some Jewish groups. Everyone does this. It's very successful. But it doesn't really matter if you're thinking about the future of the species, because they're obviously not going to go into space. And if they try to impose their values on any high technology group that's able to sustain themselves, is going to be bringing AK-47s to an automated drone swarm fight. It's just not relevant. And so, it's sort of about a collection of everybody who wants to create a future coming together and being like, what does that future look like? And that means a lot of very offensive concepts. If you're talking about space travel, right? Like everyone's like, oh, humans aren't different from each other. Humans will never be different from each other. And I'm like, well, if you're living in a spaceship, you need genetic modifications for zero G. Anybody who's like broadly sane realizes this. Unless you make massive modifications to how the spaceship works, just to handle the fact that we evolved in an environment that expected all of our valves to work alongside gravity. And then it's like, well, and if you colonize a planet that has 10x Earth gravity, you, the zero G spaceship species, now needs to build a new species for that planet, right? And it's like, so why do we even care about genetic differences when we know our descendants are going to functionally be a collection of species that work together that are far more genetically distinct than any human population today? But that's sort of who I am and what I think about.
Brilliant. Excellent introduction. And I'm really keen to get into this. So I've divided the questions I want to ask you into four main sections. We'll talk about history.
Yes.
We'll talk about the future. There's a good pair that match. We'll talk about culture today. And then I want to talk more about you, like turn the spotlight on you a bit, because I think most of the content, I know you give a lot away. I think you're a very open book in a lot of the content that you do. But
Yes, I am. A lot of things that people can use to attack me. That's the point. That's how you get the viral stuff.
Okay, so let's start with history. And I think one thing we're both really obsessed with is the possibility that Christianity won in the Western world, in Europe, because it had demographic advantages over the prevailing pagan culture that was in decline. Uh,
Yeah, we have an episode on it was one of our worst performing episodes because it released it on Christmas. Because I thought, oh, Christmas episode, but I didn't think like, oh, nobody's gonna. But it was, is Christianity really more moral? And so we were contrasting Christian systems, specifically a book called "The Rise of Christianity" by somebody, famous anthropologist or something. And what it showed, using a lot of historical data, was Christianity had a far higher birth rate, mostly because it didn't practice exposure, which was common at the time,
mm,
which was like abortion after the child was born. And exposure was so bad. One of our future kids, we're going to name them Tacticus. I love the name Tacticus. I love Tacticus as a figure. But Tacticus didn't have all the most PC takes. He really didn't like Jews. And one of his complaints about the Jews, which I always love, is that they didn't expose their children when they didn't want them. He's
mm.
like, the Jews never leave babies to die. And I just love this because it's such like an inversion of like the blood libel trope about Jews. It's like when killing babies is normal, it's like those disgusting, immoral Jews, they don't kill babies. And then blood libel comes along and it's like, those Jews, they kill babies. I'm like, you can never get a break. But anyway, this actually came from Judaism. Actually, monogamy, though, came from the Romans. And we point out this. If you look at ancient Judaism, like Solomon, like however many 1,000 wives or whatever, right? But anyway, so you sort of merge monogamy, which helps with fertility rates in many ways, and you merge not killing babies, which helps with fertility rates. And then you also, during plague times, they looked at statistics on this, and like far fewer Christians died of plague because they didn't like abandon their own when the plagues happened. It wasn't like an all for one. But anyway, historically, we argue that basically a person's religion, which was largely their cultural practices, acted as sort of an evolving set on top of their biology, which also evolved, right? So
Mm.
you sort of have an evolving hardware and an evolving software, and the software can evolve much faster.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's to the point that you're saying there is we talk about the one of the things I love to point out is if you're talking about this software on top of this hardware, almost every religious system on Earth has an arbitrary self-denial ritual, whether it's Lent or Ramadan or the Sabbath or like any of the Buddhist nonsense. They all have self-denial rituals, and we like threw that out. And now everyone's like, oh, I got to go on my juiced fast or whatever. It's like we realize that like arbitrary self-denial is actually very useful, right? But anyway, where are you going with this?
Well, I'm a biologist as well at heart, and I think there are parallels between how cultures adapt to high density living with how social insects acquire hygienic traits for like
Yeah,
pushing beetles and mites and stuff out of their hives or cleaning themselves fastidiously. There's really clear parallels. I mean, E.O. Wilson, we're basically ant monkeys. Um, and yeah, when you pack people together in cities and new diseases become viable, the quickest way you can deal with that is culture. And I would maybe refer as well to the impact of the syphilis epidemic in Europe that like dramatically changed sexual morality. That this
yeah,
disease suddenly emerged that just kissing somebody casually could lead to like a hideous, embarrassing, disfiguring, fatal illness that not just you but your entire family are now afflicted with.
yeah.
Mm. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, if you talk about, sorry, to get spicy here, if you talk about diseases, one of the things that we talk about is if you think of culture as like this evolving thing on top of humanity, we say that it is possible to get parasitic cultures that are not interested in increasing. And one of the things is people can think religions or cultures survive or pass themselves on by conversion. And we go into a lot of evidence in our Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion that like conversions are just not that common historically,
mm,
and that most cultures pass themselves on by augmenting the biological fitness of the group that they are the host to. But you can get like a cordyceps virus, right? Like in ants or something, cordyceps fungus, sorry.
mm.
Things that just sort of use the host to replicate and don't care about their own reproductive fitness. And this is one of the things that we argue leads to low fertility rates is the sort of variety of viruses, mimetic viruses that have evolved in urban centers, because that's what you were talking about.
Mm.
And one of the points I always make is people are like, why are Jews so resistant to fertility collapse when they have wealth? Right.
Mm.
Because anyone could look at Israel and be like, what, how is this developed country having a fertility TFR of like 3? It's like double the next highest TFR of a developed world country. And we often point out that if you look historically, as somebody who studies history, you would know that most populations in cities were not above repopulation rate. They were
Yeah,
almost always dying.
yeah.
Any group that was living in a city, they would take from the countryside and fill the city. And the death rate in city was always really high. The only exception to this was Jews,
Mm.
who predominantly lived in cities. Well, not if you go far enough back, but the surviving Jewish population lived in cities. That's a whole different tangent that we can get to. But anyway, the surviving population lived in cities. And so they had a lot of exposure to all of these viral memes that they developed cultural resistance to just from sort of like an exposure to sort of a vaccine level of them.
Mm. Do you think something like a new Jew will emerge in the new industrial megacities, that some subculture will crack the code? They'll put together a bunch of cultural defenses that become sustainable?
It's extremely unlikely. The reason why Jews were able to develop a defense is because they were exposed to a much less developed version of the mimetic virus that
Mm.
was much less virulent. Again, like a vaccine. They basically got exposed to like a idiot version of the virus for like 100 years before anyone else, right? So
Mm.
they had a very, this is also why like Northern Europe, despite being wealthier than Southern Europe, has a higher fertility rate. Normally the poorer you are, the higher fertility rate. Is why the United States now, and if you talk like 5 years into the future, this is definitely going to be the case, but it's just now like maybe becoming the case, has a higher fertility rate than Latin America, even though it's much wealthier. Typically you would expect the inverse. And this is because we've just been exposed to this sort of prodromal isn't the right reason, but like an early and less a virulent version of the virus.
Mm. It's almost like a psychological arms race. And I think about this with advertising, that if you took modern consumers and exposed them to really effective ads from the 1950s, they wouldn't work because
Yeah,
our cultural defenses against manipulation have been trained by like this ever ratcheting level of sophistication in the advertisers trying to manipulate us. And I almost wonder if you know, like you see martial arts movies where like in the final scene the fighter like takes all of these weights off their arms and legs and reveals that they were fighting at like half
Oh,
their
you're
speed.
talking Naruto here. I always love that.
Yeah, I,
Yeah.
I wonder if that could happen culturally at some point, if all of that pressure of manipulation from advertisers falls away at some point in the future, will we be left strengthened by that ordeal that we've gone
The
through?
problem is, it's not just advertising, there's other human beings,
Yeah.
right? Like, so keep it. This is why we argue that when people are like, why is fertility falling so quickly in like East Asia, right? When it started falling so much later. Why is it falling so quickly in Latin America when it started falling so much later? And it's because they were exposed to the more sort of virulent, I'd almost say sort of invasive forms of this mimetic virus that they didn't have time to adapt to.
Mm, mm,
And keep in mind, the vast majority of the reason people cave isn't due to advertisers. It's due, I mean, look, capitalism and companies have like worked to spread the virus because the virus tells you, your purpose in life is to consume and to search for validation and to search for pleasure, and that's useful to companies. But the companies aren't the main, sort of foot soldiers of this.
mm,
I'd actually say the academic system has become the primary foot soldiers.
mhm,
So even if
mhm,
you got rid of all the companies, you'd still have to deal with academia, and then you'd have to deal with the people online who will like screech at you if you disagree with the status quo.
mm, mm. A related question. So, this idea, I would call it demographic ecology in history, that the city centers functioned as kind of a predator or a parasite of the rural populations.
Yeah.
And we also often accuse like our wealthy elites of being parasites. But if you know a bit of ecology, you know that parasites and predators in the right setting can increase the stability and the vibrancy of an ecosystem, that they can actually serve a positive role. And the model of this I like to think of, if you imagine like pre-industrial agricultural civilization without cities, what happens to all of that surplus population that builds up in the rural areas? Would it
Oh,
actually be a
absolutely.
net,
And
yeah,
I'm
would
not
it be a net
anti-city.
negative?
I'm not anti-development either. A lot of
Mm,
people are like, one of the books my wife hates so much is *Sapiens* because she's like, oh, if we only went back to pre-agricultural. So in my early career, I studied human evolution and I worked at the Smithsonian. And if you've ever been to the Smithsonian and seen the human development stuff, I actually made one of the exhibits there. So very, and one of the things I always remember because I was doing scans of all the early hominid skulls is looking at one of these hominid skulls. And it had all these marks on it, right? And it had its face eaten away by fungus, while it was alive. I don't think that people realize to the bone that
mm,
their bone literally bubbled away for decades. People don't realize how horrifying life was in a pre-agricultural period. And cities, I also think people don't realize how much cities are fertility shredders. If you go to Edinburgh, because I spent some time in Edinburgh, one of the things you'll notice if you're staying in one of the houses is all these like little bird nooks that are really scenic today, and you're like, why did they have these little like pigeon nooks everywhere? And the reason was because they would use them to get their food for the day. They would try to like grab the pigeons from the pigeon nooks near their house that they could eat. Like
mm.
that's how you got your local daily chicken or whatever. um that's like eating rats off the street. It's like building a rat trap, which I'm sure people did for like your daily rat. The horror of cities historically, I think, is really understated to people today. um there was a one on like the density of Rome. Oh, I don't remember it all, so I won't go into it. But anyway, I think it was like 8 times more dense than Manhattan today or something. Like
Mm,
it's high, like we're talking like crazy density.
mm,
And the horror you can imagine if you're talking like 3 stories in that level density, not great.
mm. I have another broad question. Yeah, let's focus on the history of this first. So, the first highly visible attempts at what today is called eugenics were, I think, broadly agreed to be a disaster wherever they were implemented. But how much do you think that was due to the scale and the centralization and the politicization of those attempts, that the science was like premature and it was applied for usually political
Well,
reasons
I
in the
mean, I think
end?
understanding what eugenics is really important because I think eugenics is always evil and deplorable. And what eugenics is, if you go to Wikipedia or you go to most mainstream definitions, it's the belief that there are good genes and bad genes
Mm.
at like an existential level, and it is a government's job or a population groups through shaming or anything like that to promote good genes.
Yeah.
So if you like, it's come out that we funded like germline gene editing, like human genetic editing. So if one population says, I want to genetically edit humans, and and the government says, or another population says, well, we want to shame you for this, or we want to make this illegal. The group that is attempting to make certain human beings illegal because of their genetics is the eugenicists.
Mm.
It is not the group that is doing the genetic modification. And this is really true. If you go 100 years from now and, whoever you are, your great grandchildren are talking to my great grandchildren, and my great grandchildren are genetically modified, right? And they're like, I know those people. Like, they're cool. Like, why did my ancestors think that genetically modified humans don't have a right to exist?
Mm.
When you understand that eugenics is believing that some people, because of their genetics or the genetic choices of their ancestors, don't have a right to exist, that's really horrifying, right?
Mm.
And people know that we do genetic selection of our children through like embryo selection and everything like that. Although really we're just trying to order our embryos, and then eventually with the later embryos, if we can get to them, we will do genetic modification.
Mm.
So I do believe there is something. I don't think it's the same as killing a person, but I do think it is morally wrong to kill an embryo. And I think the word is kill an embryo.
Mm.
So I wouldn't do that, but I also think that if I, because of this belief, don't engage in something like IVF, which my wife and I need to do to have kids, I have denied my children the chance to exist. And I've like interacted with my children, and I'm like, how many embryos' lives is every one of my like 4-year-olds' lives worth? And it's a fucking lot. Because that's the scale that I'm trading at, right?
Mm.
And people can look at this. I always point out to people because in Germany you can't do any of the genetic stuff that we do. And I go, do you understand that like we weren't mad at Nazis because they were trying to make people healthier? We were mad at them because they were telling people who could have kids and how they could have kids. And then people will come to me and they'll be like, come on, Malcolm, surely you don't think that in the 1950s or whatever, that American soldiers would have been for like scientists augmenting people to try to improve them. And I'm like, are you insane? The very avatar of anti-Nazi propaganda was Captain America,
Mm.
who was an American who was genetically modified by scientists. Like, what are you talking about? That was not the problem we had with Nazis.
Well, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the crux of the historic problem was the centralization of the decision making and then the
Yeah,
enforcement of that decision on everyone. And I mean, even if everyone like agrees to that, there's also strategic risks in that. If the science is wrong, if you make the wrong decision, if everyone thinks this is the gene that you need to have to improve, and we all go down that path, it could lead to a coordinated disaster that. Whereas if it's left to the individuals to decide what they
yeah.
want to do, you end up with a much more diverse, decentralized, non-authoritarian kind of implementation of it. I don't think the word eugenics can be applied to the individual scale. And I would even bring up the example that when people choose the best partner for producing children, that is kind of a form of eugenics. You are selecting the
Well,
best genes that are available to you
if
to
you
make that
use the
decision.
twisted version, it's 100% a version of eugenics. It's if you use the twisted version of eugenics, choosing sperm at a sperm bank is eugenics.
Mm.
Like based on the person's characteristics. It's a stupid utilization of the term that is not useful in any sort of mainstream sense.
Mm. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Well, do you have
Well,
any?
hold on,
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
side note
Oh,
here, because many
yeah.
people they hear this
Mm.
and they hear what you're saying, and they're like, oh, well, what if people select against traits that blah 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 that I have? And the thing about polygenics, when you get to choose the genetics of your own offspring is that you are making choices around things that you yourself experience. Like my wife has autism. All of my kids have autism. I could select against that if I wanted to, and I don't. If
Mm,
anything, if we got to the point where I could select for it, I would because I like my wife and I like my kids, right? And we're going to get populations that are actually like very genetically distant for each other because they're making different hypotheses about what genes are good. Some groups are going to say genes around creativity are good. Some groups are going to say genes around raw processing are good. Some groups are going to say genes around happiness are good. And we'll get to see objectively which genes are better in an open playing field.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And to some degree, that should be self-equilibrating. I mean, it's similar to gender selection in China, that so many people chose to have male children at the same time that the female
Yeah.
children suddenly became the more valued. It's
Actually, funny
self-correcting.
note, watch a recent episode we did on this. Females are actually having a harder time dating in China now than males.
Ah, interesting.
It's a very bizarre phenomenon. We did an episode on this, like why nobody wants to date Chinese girls. I think we called it to try to make it sound offensive. But there's like dating events where like 1,000, like I think it was like okay, I'm trying to remember the exact number. I think it was like 600 or 700 Chinese women showed up. They paid, men had it free, and only like 50 men showed up.
Oh, wow.
And this has happened very regularly in China. And the main reason for this is that uh the women are acting frankly terribly to the men who show up at these. Like they'll like line up for the men, but then despite lining up for the men, they'll just barrage them with like, how much do you make? Do you have a home, etc., and then chastise them if they don't.
Yeah, it's a cultural breakdown in
Yeah.
real time. Um, Now, let's move on to talking about the future, but still on this same thread. Do you have any intuitions about when human genetic engineering might become broadly acceptable in various parts of
It
the world?
will
And do you think some
become
will go
broadly
before
accepted.
others?
Well, I mean, it'll eventually, sorry, I should make. Okay, so we talk about genetic engineering or genetic selection in humans. The populations that are sustainable today, that actually have a large number of kids, are the populations that are often most resistant to this technology.
Hmm.
Like, if I'm talking about your average person that has 4 kids or more, what do they think of this technology? The number who are pro it are like 0.01%.
Mm.
Even if in the general population, you might be talking like 20% of the population is for it. And so that is why for the rare high fertility couples that do engage with it, they will have an outsized impact on humanity's future because obviously eventually the people who engage in this intergenerationally are going to outcompete the groups that don't. So long term, basically it's like whenever we have space travel it's going to be widely used, especially when you look at like now we can even have AI like fully create genes. I think the first one was done like last week. So like and proteins and stuff like that. So like now we're there technologically speaking. It's just are we there in terms of the sustainable population groups?
Do you think that our understanding of genetics is still premature when it comes to engineering? Do you
No,
think?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't do it with my kids right now. The reason I don't implement the technology on my kids right now is because I think it would be immoral to apply to humans now. But if we look at the advancement we've seen in genetics because of AI, where will we be in 10 years? Oh my God, yeah, I think it's totally fine to be doing this in 10 years.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, you mentioned China too, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on whether the unfolding demographic collapse in China increases or decreases their incentive to engage in a war. And and
Interesting
and
question.
and the conflicts like the world wars kind of becoming impossible with the shifting demographic situation. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Are we at the last war? I mean, I don't know. Like, look at something like Taiwan, right? People are like, should we defend Taiwan if they're attacked? Taiwan has a fertility rate that's at or below 1, right? Like,
mm,
I've seen numbers that are around 0.7, like lower than Korea's, right? That means for every 100 Taiwanese people, there's only going to be like 4 great grandchildren, right? So,
mm.
like, is it worth sending our people to die to defend a country that is not relevant in a few generations, right? Like, why not just bring them to our country and let them die here, right? Like, or die out here. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Take some part of like Nevada or something. Say, hey, we'll put up a big solar farm. You can get all the power you want for your AI chips and research, and we will remove you from Taiwan, and you don't need to deal with that being
mm.
next to people who want to kill you. That would be cheaper for us than going to war with China. It would F over China much more. Give them a getting empty Taiwan.
Mm.
I know a lot of like American, whatever, anti-immigration people. I'm sure, you get spokespeople like me enough time. We can smooth it over with them. We're like, look, the Taiwanese are basically sterile. Don't worry about it. But no, what I'm saying here is you look at something like China. It's really hard to go to war when you don't have a lot of young people, right? Like young people are the ones who do revolutions. Look at the revolution in Nepal that happened recently, like the Gen Z
Mm.
revolution, right? You
There's
need
one of
young
those
people.
starting in Kenya as well, by the look of it.
Oh, really? That'd be cool.
Mm.
What are they fighting for in Kenya?
There's a austerity budget coming in, which is going to like massively make life significantly more difficult in a short amount of time. So yeah, the young people are rioting over that.
Well,
Mm.
dang. I mean, they probably need austerity measures in Kenya, but we'll see.
Mm. How important do you think epidemics will be in the 21st century? And what about biological warfare as possibly a newer and cheaper way of doing international conflict rather than missiles
I mean,
and
it's
boots on the ground?
possible. Keep in mind what AI can do. If we have AI that can invent genomes
Mm,
right now with like the early computer versions. We're like at the 5 years into like AI development. Like imagine where we were like 5 years into PC development or something, right? Like we were dealing with like pseudo like keyboards, like DOS interfaces, everything like that. We can already create genomes. How long is AI from being able to create a virus that can kill only one ethnic group or only
mm.
one, population? Uh
Or I would say
7 years.
more practically invent a new bioweapon and a new vaccine for it at the same time.
Oh yeah, that'd be even better, right? Or you get to a company and it can create a bioweapon and then a weekly injection you need to stay alive that's proprietary.
Hmm.
You don't know like what we're getting into in terms of this next generation of stuff. And I think that people are just underestimating how much AI changes everything.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's a big unknown X factor. I would maybe make comparisons as well with the cycle of Roman civilization, that they had their really big wars during their ascendancy, and then once they were in their decline, it was mostly little rebellions and incursions kind of nibbling
Yeah.
at the corners. There were no great rivals left. And I would maybe suggest that China and the US aren't really in a position to do something like a World War One or two anymore. I mean, I think most of the world's missile production went into the Ukraine war and like depleted stocks, and that's just one medium-sized regional conflict.
Yeah, one of the funny things is when everyone's like, "What if Russia uses a nuke in this conflict?" And I go, "Do you know when the last time Russia publicly tested a nuke was?
Mm,
It was before I was born. It was 30 effing years ago the last time they publicly tested a nuke.
mm,
You really think Russian nukes still work after 30 years of not testing? You know they couldn't fly their jets, they couldn't even move their cars because the tires hadn't been rotated. If they had usable nukes, they would have tested them just to prove to the world they're usable. There's no way Putin would leave that up to chance. So if he had tested the nukes and they didn't work, you wouldn't know about it, and we'd be in the situation we are now. If he had tested them and they did work, he would test them more publicly, so we definitely knew that they worked. But anyway, yeah, I hear what you're saying on this.
It's interesting that nuclear weapons versus biological weapons are so complementary. With a nuke, it's extremely difficult to use them in a way that isn't instantly attributed to the person who is behind that decision. Whereas biological
Yeah.
weapons have the ultimate deniability. They can come
Well,
from basically nowhere.
and consider gene drives and stuff like this that we might be able to do in human populations now. Or if you're not familiar with gene drive, that means that the genes copy purely onto the partners. So it'd be like you basically get to cuck your spouse, right?
Mm,
So I could engineer my children with gene drives on certain genetic components,
mm,
which is a totally different type of biological warfare than I think a lot of people are predicting.
mm. Now, intersecting these ideas, how does a prolonged demographic decline influence the chance of humans doing something like space colonization, or even maintaining like high technology, like high-end microchip factories in Taiwan?
I
Like,
mean, it would be absolutely catastrophic if not for AI. And we're at this weird time where people are like, what do you think is going to happen? As like the leader, I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, AI changes everything. AI expands the capacity of the much smaller population that's going to continue to exist.
mm,
But it also makes the vast majority of humanity potentially irrelevant. Because if you look at like competent populations, like you look at a population like the US, the less economically and technologically productive a region is, the higher its fertility rate, the lower its fertility rate, the more economically and technologically productive. If you look at high fertility families that are technologically and economically productive, you're looking at maybe 10,000 on Earth, and that sort of defines the future of human civilization. But those 10,000 are going to be multiplied, a billion fold with AI agents, right? In terms of their capacity. So I don't know. I'd say when people are like, we should stop AI development now, I'm like, well, humanity's already given up. So maybe let's not stop with the shadow humanity, right? Like the mirror humanity. They're fine.
mm.
We're gonna need them.
Um, well, along that route, what do you think? And this is kind of getting into culture, but what if people stopped believing in some grand goal like space colonization? Just to, the economy and the population decline, like if it became a pervasive shift in the myth of like our kind of religious culture, if we stop believing, I mean, something that could possibly trigger that is if Musk's empire collapses for, mundane business reasons, for financial reasons, and he is kind of like the poster child of Mars colonization. Have you had any thoughts on like what the cultural impact of that could be, and how we could reorient around a new grand goal?
Largely irrelevant. So the reason why it's irrelevant is because the only people who have kids are the people with some sort of exogenous motivation. The vast majority of humanity does not care about God or space colonization or humanity existing. And so they don't reproduce because they're living for their own personal validation or their own personal pleasure or their own whatever, right?
Mm,
Like when you have a large number of kids, like let's say 10 kids, any sort of reasonable number, 6, 7, whatever, right? Like not like, piddly 2 or 3 or whatever. You like, and if you're having 3 kids and you're from a culture where you have 3 kids and you think that's a lot of kids, that means a lot of people in your culture are having 1 or 0 kids, which means you're not going to exist in the future. You need some sort of exogenous motivation beyond your own personal validation or pleasure or nihilism. And that exogenous motivation might be space travel, it might be Christianity, it might be Judaism, it might be Islam, it might be this belief in like a genetic betterment of humanity or whatever, right? Like, but you're going to need a reason. Everybody who exists in the future is going to have a reason for existing, and that's one of the big things that's going to change about humanity. Is the groups that don't have a reason to exist just won't exist in the future. Because you look at what our generation has dealt with, and our challenges are like fucking video games and internet and chat rooms. Our kids are going to have like pleasure pods that can simulate with AI like anything they could conceivably want. They're going to have AI wives and AI children and AI anything, right? If they're living for their subjective experience of reality, that can be maximized without playing a part in the continued human game. So every group that does stay in the continued human game is going to have a reason to do that.
That makes me wonder, do you think various flavors of neurodiversity are a kind of uh, a defense against those like mass
Well,
consumerists?
I think
Like,
some forms
like
of
if people have a really odd psychology, it's hard to market to them specifically. Like the average
that's a
video
really
game isn't going
smart
to
point.
appeal to
Yeah.
really odd people.
Yeah, it's a really smart point. I think that neurodiverse populations will, and I mean real neurodiverse populations, not this fake BS progressive nonsense, right? Like The people who are actually neurodiverse are going to survive at a higher rate. I completely agree with what you're saying. I often point out that if you look at autism, not the less intelligent type autism, but the autism that Elon has, or my wife has, or my kids have, okay, so what's wrong with my wife? She doesn't like interacting with people. She has to clean everything after anyone touches it. She emotionally stays at home. She's very efficient with her time, but she has to structure it really solidly. It's like, oh my God, everything that's an advantage within our current age. Now, I don't think it evolved to be an advantage within our current age. She just lucked out that this worked. But there are some things that are going to be selected for and some things that are going to be selected against.
I really wonder if there's parallels with the human bottleneck that led to behaviorally modern humans. That there
Oh,
seems to have
smart
been like,
idea.
yeah, well, there was a massive population crash due to I think a volcanic eruption that caused
Well,
like
we
a
don't know. I mean, how small did it get? Like 90 people or something? Or like
yeah, it was like about 1,000 or a few thousand people,
that might
and
have been a sound, yeah.
yeah, and something dramatically changed in how they related to other people. I often wonder what it was like for the very stodgy insular Neanderthals when the first modern humans turned up with like body paint all over them, dancing and singing in all sorts of bizarre ways, with all of these weird tools and implements that they'd like obsessively crafted out of things in their environment. Like that must have seemed like an autistic person turning up with a completely different way of interacting with the world.
That's a funny way of looking at it. Well, I mean, so we don't know that Neanderthals, I mean, we know from some Neanderthal tombs that they had a lot of like pollens and stuff like that, and things that looked like they may have had body paint and intentional burials.
Mm,
We don't know 100%, but they may have. I will say that whatever changed in that population that survived, it certainly allowed them to outcompete every other hominid species or subspecies that was around.
mm.
Um, it's just a very interesting point. One of the other things that we point out is that humans are largely ignorant, I think, because we can't admit that different people are different, of the genetic diversity within current humanity. We have a recent episode where we talk about this. I was unaware of this, so I looked into it. But the cosine people, these are this African group that's quite genetically distinct from other
Oh,
human populations.
it's Khoisan.
Khoisan.
Yeah,
Did you know that they are more genetically distant from Europeans than Neanderthals?
yeah,
I
yeah,
I
yeah. It's
I
amazing.
I was unaware of this because I knew that they split off after Neanderthals, but when I actually looked at like the base pair nuclei, I was like, that's crazy.
I,
Why aren't we like doing everything we can to protect there's if there's like another hominid species
yeah,
alive today,
yeah.
why are we just allowing them to be extincted? Like this
It's
seems
also a tragedy that they are just put under the cultural label of black. And
yeah,
like the Bantu, like the Bantu more recently arrived black people in South Africa
the
see them as
Bantu.
subhuman. They discriminate against them terribly.
Oh, absolutely. And the Bantu are way closer to Europeans than they are to the Kosa
Mm,
or
mm,
Khoisan or
mm.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I had no I didn't know about all this, but I was when I did that episode, I was like, that's crazy. Why I want to save these groups.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and the whole cultural lens on race has become so simplified and polarized and unproductive and unhelpful that they just become erased. Their whole plight is
Yeah.
invisible.
Another fun one I found recently was the people, the natives of Papua New Guinea have 3.5% Devonian Devosian
Denisovan.
Denisovan DNA.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I was surprised by that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, they're really extraordinary people, right on our doorstep. Well, this brings me to a question. Like, is it kind of ironic that we're so obsessed with human genetics and race differences at this time in history, when in the past there was way more diversity among humans, and potentially in the future there's going to be way more diversity created as well? We're in this kind of like pinch point of like absolute genetic diversity, but and I would relate it to like you said, if we had a really distinctively different surviving hominin population, if there were Homo erectus still living on an island somewhere, there
Yeah.
would be no debate about why they weren't going to be the next president of the United States. They would be different enough that we could accept those differences. But if
Yeah.
there's only small differences between groups, it's much easier to get confused and in conflict over them. And it's a bit like this. If somebody asks to borrow $1 million from you and you say no, you're likely to understand it because like that's a really big thing to ask. But if you ask to borrow $1 and they say no, you're more likely to fall into conflict because you can both argue that it's not a big difference. And I wonder if that's kind of the dynamic that's happening with race differences at the moment. They're small enough that there's so much overlap between the groups that we
I
can
don't think
reach
that's
towards
it.
ideals of equality, but there are still some differences.
I'm talking with a European journalist, right? And I talk about doing the gene editing that we do as a family and as a culture. And they're like, well, what if in X many generations you have a kid who's like dramatically smarter than other people? And I'm like, what the F is the problem with that? Like, do you hate smart people? Like, do you think that smart people make society worse? Like smart people grape at a lower rate. Smart people murder at a lower rate. Smart people are more pro-social. Like, why is it bad if my kids are smarter? And I realized, oh, it's because you've built this lie where our modern society only works because we pretend that nobody's actually different from anyone else. But if nobody's actually different from anyone else, then why does diversity have any value, right? Like if everyone is interchangeable, then there is no value in diversity, right? And when we look at populations that are going extinct and we accept that they are different, so like let's look at Asian populations, right? Because Asian populations are just basically going extinct. It is really horrifying what's happening in East Asia in terms of fertility rates. Um, we did an episode where we talk about the what might make Asian populations genetically distinct from other populations in terms of because you can look at outcomes in terms of the way they act and everything like that, and they're much more communalist. They're much less prone to like random debates, etc. And there was a great paper that was done on this. It was actually done by an Asian academic. So I'm not talking about this with an Asian academic who was looking at this. And he looked at the populations that Asians and Native Americans are descended from, and he pointed out that they spend a very long region in extremely cold environments. And he's like, this might be why they are more prone to communalism and less prone to random debate. Because if you're in an extremely cold environment and you need to be like 5 people to a tent, and if any one person is upsetting in that tent and they get kicked out of that tent, they die, right? Like you're gonna find a way to get along with people. And the thing that many people pointed out of that episode, and it's like, and this is gonna be important for space travel, right?
Mm.
Like this, whatever makes them okay with being like, okay, I have spent a long genetic period where we had tents in freezing environments, and anyone who pissed everyone else in the tent off just effing died. We need that for spaceships. And I'm like, that is 100% true. And if I was genetically augmenting my offspring, I would look for whatever in their DNA like coded for that and be like, I need that. Because that's the other thing when we talk about a world of genetic augmentation is ethnicities and genetic diversity becomes the scale of our paint canvas. It doesn't become a reason to hate people, right?
Mm. Mm.
And I think and one of the things I point out about like the Nazis or whatever, the groups that were like actually into like the bad kind of eugenics, is they wanted what the same people who are like yell at me and my wife and they go, you are polluting the gene pool with your weird science. They wanted genetic purity. They believed in some true vanilla version of humanity that we could recreate through getting to some past state of humanity instead of some future state of humanity. So, yeah, I think that you're right, and that's what we say anyway.
Mm. Oh, here's a counter argument. So we can look at high intelligence individuals and say, on average, they do better in society. Are there potentially unforeseen systemic effects? Like if everybody had an IQ of 130, would the society necessarily be better? And if that was the case, why hasn't that already evolved naturally?
It's not a relevant concern because only like 1 or 2% of the population that actually has a lot of kids would be willing to do any sort of genetic modification.
Mm.
The idea that there will ever be a human population where everyone is genetically modified is just out of touch with the reality of the populations that are high fertility.
Hmm.
So I'm just not like, could it be a case that there is like a reason that our IQs are capped? Yeah. Um, but I think it's much more likely that our IQs are capped for like caloric reasons.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, we won't know unless we try.
Yeah, was one of the things that people don't get about like artificial wombs. People assume because the mother adapts to the baby as it's growing and can give it like better immune stuff and better like it gives it more of this and more of this when it needs this, right? And so they look at this and they're like, an artificial womb will never outcompete a normal womb. Where I would suspect the first children who are born entirely of artificial wombs are going to be like 30% like larger, taller, smarter, everything like that,
Mm.
because people are forgetting how much there was a great book on this, how much like infants sort of compete with the mother for resources.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you just give the infant all the resources it needs, you might get a dramatically different outcome.
Hmm. Hmm. Even without changing genes, it could just be a developmental plasticity issue.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like we don't know how much mothers are actually sort of, without meaning to, starving their children of nutrients that they could use to grow much larger and healthier and faster, even if you control for. Okay, so a child in an artificial womb is never gonna have to deal with their mom getting sick or falling down or being anxious or anything like that, right?
Mm.
So I won't deny that there are some negatives, but I just think the positives are gonna outweigh them extremely.
Mm. Well, with or without artificial wombs, in various places today, surrogacy works to supply the desires of infertile couples. Do you think that surrogacy would ever be used for governments or corporations if the demographic decline gets desperate enough?
Well, I don't think surrogacy is really relevant in terms of fulfilling demographic needs because it's just so expensive and time consuming and everything like that. If you look at a country where you might get more authoritarian demographic methods, it's going to be more likely forced insemination than in surrogacy.
Mm.
So, in China, during the one child policy, there were many regions where a woman would go in for checkup, and they'd give her an abortion, or a woman would
Mm.
go in, because she sprained her leg and they give her an abortion, right? Even if it was her first kid. Because they just wanted to get their birth numbers down and police the government. Given that they were able to go that authoritarian within those times, uh, could a woman go in for a flu and they have her husband's DNA on file and they inseminate her, or they're just like, oh, if you go in for a flu after 28 and you don't have a husband, it's random person's DNA.
Mm.
And that'll scare women into getting married right quick. Um, no, I'm 100% serious here. Like
Mm.
China
Mm.
is not above this stuff. They
Mm.
totally do this right now. They're doing this whole PR campaign about their artificial womb project, even though it's clearly faked.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm quite familiar with the most advanced artificial womb tech, and it is not in China.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely some interesting technological hurdles on that front, which
I think we'll be past them in a year and a half.
oh, interesting. Interesting.
I'm
I
just
hope you
saying
do
that maybe
some.
the public doesn't know everything I know.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to see some episodes from you on that topic.
We can't discuss it.
Ah, okay, okay. Um,
That's what I'm saying. Maybe the public doesn't know everything I know. I'm just
okay,
saying that we
okay,
might be closer to artificial wombs than people think.
okay, okay. That's really interesting to at least get a hint of that. Um, Now, oh, I'm curious too. Some industries in particular are hurt by anti-natalist messaging. Do you think it's surprising that none have like started to push back?
I don't think industries are, I mean, very few industries. So there's two sort of lifestyles you can live. You can live a lifestyle where you dedicate yourself to humanity's future and you have kids and you make the sacrifices involved in that. Or you can live the lifestyle where you dedicate yourself to yourself and you just buy all the random stuff you want, right? Like
Mm.
clearly it's better for mass industry, whether it's Target or Walmart or whether whatever else, to be anti-natalist, right? Antinatalism goes hand in hand with large capitalist enterprises because they are not they have a great deal of time sensitivity
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
obviously it's not in their
It's the
best
next
interest
quarter.
long term.
Yeah, it's the next quarter sale
Yeah,
figures is all they're really optimizing for.
yeah, so they don't care.
Mm. Yeah, yep, that makes sense. Now, I have a question too. I have been really interested in your discussions on clan-based low trust social structures versus how odd Western Europe is. And I've
Yeah.
seen some arguments that social arrangement in like the Middle East and India emerged relatively recently. And I wonder if there's a risk that with increasing economic pressures, that the West is going to go down a similar path, and we will lose that weirdness. We'll lose our Western
Well, we
educated,
will.
yeah,
Can you
individual.
hear me still, by the way?
Yep, yeah, all good. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I saw a flash on screen. That's not me. Yeah, so I mean, we often argue that the Western clan-based systems do better in terms of fertility rates than and note the Western clan-based systems were also later to democracy, later to accept capitalism.
Mm.
I'm not saying it's good. Like I'm from one of these structures, which is like the Greater Appalachian cultural tradition, which was way more clan-based than the rest of the United States. And it just seems that these are the only groups that are able to motivate reproduction. And so the question is can they adopt the things that made the quote unquote weird, weird acronym cultures good? Maybe, or maybe there's a way to adopt weird cultures to be high fertility. I think it's easier for clan-based systems to adopt what makes weird structures good than it is for weird structures to adopt the things that make the clan structures high fertility.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting take. Well, I even wonder, going further than that, though, like when you boil down social structures to the smallest viable units, so far it's been the nuclear husband and wife, like single
Yeah.
couple household with like uh, dedicated resource sharing monogamy, at least long enough to produce above replacement children. And I wonder if there might be a possible model that goes further individualism that allows uncoupled individuals to somehow coordinate to produce above replacement fertility rates. And what I wonder what
But
that would look like.
I mean, I 100% could see that. Um, I don't know what it would look like. Somebody would have to try to do that, right?
Mm,
And I see people trying to do this already, right? And keep in mind that this can look very different when you have IVG, right? Like which allows males to breed and females to breed, which is another technology we're invested in.
mm.
Um, in which case, I have some friends who are like mainstream, like MGTOW influencers and stuff like that, right? Like some of the biggest ones. And they're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Like just completely break off from humanity, only create male children and only have them create male children. And I'm like, that's a fun take. And then there's people who said they want to do this with women. But the funny thing is that the women have had the capacity to do this for about the past 50 years,
Mm,
and not a single group of women have done this.
mm.
Created a colony of only women.
Well, here's something I think that's vital into the mix. Um, is the solution to be found in restoring economic viability to children? So at the moment, children are these weird, expensive pets up until like age 30 if they're going to be
Yeah.
highly educated. Do you think there might be some way of giving children some way to be economically valuable again? Maybe
So
even
this is
for
an
raising
interesting
children.
point.
Like, why aren't
It
teenagers
has
raising babies?
a lot of offensive caveats to it. So fertility collapse started in the 1835, 1850 range, if you're talking about Europe and the United States. So a long time ago. And this is really when kids stopped being economically viable, either as farmhands or factory workers. And I'm like, it's actually really weird when you think about it that kids used to be of primary economic benefit to the parents, either through being a household income source or a social security plan for the parents.
Mm,
Whereas today, kids are of primary benefit to the state. And yet the state doesn't pay for you to raise your children.
exactly.
But the problem is that if state paid you to raise your children, treating every child as of equal value, that also wouldn't be very good because money isn't equally valuable to all people. And this would lead to a higher fertility rate among the less economically productive populations, or rather the populations that are basically living off the state. And if we're talking about one of the main negative consequences of fertility collapse, it is a dependency ratio cascade. And this is what happens when too many people are living off of Social Security in the state and too few people are paying into it. You're like, oh, you're saying some humans matter more than others. It's like, no, I'm just saying that we're dealing with a taxpayer problem. And people are like, oh, are you saying that how much a person earns or pays into taxes is in any way connected to how much their parents do? And I'm like obviously, like this is like really laid out in the data. It's incredibly tied to how much the parents pay into the system. So it would probably be bad to do that.
Mm, mm,
There is a
yes.
great system that Robin Hanson came up with for this, where when a child is born, they get credits which if you buy the credits in the child, i.e., they're sort of like stock in a child, you get 50% of the taxes that that child pays. So when a child is
Ah.
born, a company, for example, could like go into some poor neighborhood if they thought they could increase the productivity of the children in that neighborhood and like buy all the children's credits and then like put a bunch of nice parks, put a bunch of nice schools, put a bunch of nice everything. And now the child's credits have massively increased in value. And now, it's a way that turns evil into good. That's what I
Yeah.
really like about it as a system. Or a mom can be like, well, I'll only pay for college in terms of my child credits because I only want colleges that are going to increase the value of those credits, right?
Mm.
Or there's so many ways the system could work out, but it means that when a child is born from the perspective of a family who is likely to create a tax positive citizen, those credits are going to turn out incredibly positive. Like let's say like $500,000 per kid to like $1 million per kid in terms of credits you could sell. And then if you wanted to do something that would be quite Robin Hansen's system doesn't have this, but you have negative credits to be a liability. If you happen to own negative credits, that is additional taxes on you. So a company would never buy credits if they thought if the person might live off of Social Security or something like that.
Mm. And it's such a thorny central problem to mass society, and we're spinning our wheels and grappling with it, and the best intentioned solutions have the potential to turn out going really
Yeah.
wrong because it's complex systems. They're hard to design just on paper. But yeah, no, I really like that answer. Um, another possibility would potentially be like farms and factories these days are relatively inhospitable places for children. But do you think the need for humans interacting with AI could provide new economic value coming from younger people?
Unlikely. So what I will say is if you've raised kids, any of your audience who has, and you've also been engaging with AI throughout the development of the modern AI, you're like, oh my God, kids are basically AI. Like they go through the same hallucination periods, they go through the same everything like that. Um, Kids were removed from the workforce not by their own choice and not by their parents' choice, often through legal systems.
Mm,
And we try to reintroduce kids to the workforce. The problem is that AI can just do better.
mm,
Keep in mind that if you look at Elon's, robots and stuff like that are using AI, they're like hominid in format. They've been really blowing records for people. AI is going to replace us for everything but the top like 2 or 3% in terms of IQ jobs. And even then, like who knows? Like AI is
mm.
going to completely transform the world economy, and I can't even pause it. The people who think that like AI is stopping where AI is not stopping where it is today, man. And people who are like, AI doesn't change that much. I'm like, I recently fired an entire development team because I learned that AI could do it better on its own than my entire team could if I was doing it well. And if you can't do that, you just aren't good at using AI.
Mm, mm. Well, a related point, could that be part of the cultural defense system that makes some groups demographically viable if they find a way to firewall themselves collectively from uh, both the kind of consumerist manipulative culture and find a way to collectively leverage AI? Is that a model that you think
That would
might
work
work?
very well. But one
Yeah.
of the big problems that you have is a way that a lot of groups get very high fertility is by firewalling themselves from education and technology. It's a
Mm,
very good way to be high fertility, but a very bad way to have economic leverage in the future or political leverage or military leverage. So if you can find a way to sociologically firewall yourself, but not firewall yourself in terms of technology, that's the golden goose that everyone should be aiming for.
it's kind of like the digital Amish.
Yes.
Mm.
Well, I mean, that's what we try to do with our family. I mean, we call our religion Technopuritan and we try to live this life of austerity, but this very AI heavy, and we'll see if it works.
Are there hints of that being attempted in Silicon Valley as well? That people are being very protective of their children being exposed to the broader digital sphere?
Everyone who's not insane is, we all know, like 1 in 10 kids is attempting to unalive themselves in the United States on any given year, right? Like, that's not great, right? Like, we're dealing with a really horrifying statistical situation. And anyone who's like, oh yeah, we want to go further with whatever we've been sociologically doing so far, I'm like, what are you thinking?
Mm. It's interesting though, because I'm getting the intuition that we are past peak internet, that something in the magic recipe is breaking down, and people are kind of waking up. At least some people are waking up and pulling away from it, at least in its raw, algorithmic, unfiltered form.
Yeah, well, I mean, internet is dead. Like the internet is actually like dying in this generation because of AI.
Mm,
Because
mm.
look at Google. Like Google barely works anymore. Like that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we definitely live in interesting times. I want to spend a little bit of time turning the spotlight on you, and you're such fascinating people. I want to get to know you a bit better.
Yeah.
And the first question is just a general one. If you were a young, unemployed person living with your parents today, what actions and strategies would you recommend to like deal with the minefield and the gauntlet that's in front of us all?
If you're a young person living with your parents today, understand that any advice that old people have for you is completely irrelevant. College, education, jobs, everything's going to change. Everything's new. But if you can get through this crucible, you define the future of the human species.
Mm, mm,
Because so few people will. You are dealing with the hardest crucible in terms of willpower, not in terms of your suffering. Your life will be good no matter what. You can be like, oh, my life will be, yeah, your life will be good. You don't understand how bad life used to be. You
mm,
don't understand the world of regular starvation and death. But in those worlds, you were motivated to try to get over that because that was daily in front of you. You require more intrinsic motivation than any generation has ever required before. And you can try to watch our podcast to piece together some base camp Malcolm Simone. You try to piece together what to do. But I'm gonna be honest, like I don't know. Like it's really up to you. Like all I can say is it's so effing hard what you're going through, but the prize is the future of human civilization.
mm, mm. The metaphor I use is if you're cutting down a really, really big tree, there's that moment where you hear it start to crack, and there's a window of opportunity where you could push on that tree as it falls and actually change quite dramatically where it ends up. And once it's
Yeah,
down, it's down. It's too big for you to pick it up, but you can just give it a nudge at the right moment.
but once it's down is when humanity is an interstellar species. Once you're an interstellar species, you can't change us that easily.
Hmm. Hmm.
You, listener, are at the crucible as it's fallen.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Now I'm I want to learn a little bit more about like the factors in your personality or personal history that led you and your wife like choosing this particular like life direction and reproductive strategy, which like isn't something that I think anyone in history has consciously dealt with before.
Yeah. I don't know what to say other than like obviously I've got the whole story I tell for news stations and everything that oh I was in Korea and I was a VC and I was calculating the future of the population. But the reality is it's just like anyone who's broadly aware of demographic trends knows what's going on these days. They know Latin America is in complete free fall. They know Europe's in complete free fall. They know East Asia's in complete free fall. They know the only regions in the world that aren't are typically economically irrelevant or technologically irrelevant. And I want to rule the world, and this is my plan to do it. That's really it, right? Like, uh, some people have been like, oh, the malevolent world domination scheme through printing. I'm like, yeah, that's not. I mean, it's true. That's what we're in for, right? That's what I'm doing, right? World domination is so easy for this generation. All you have to do is like show up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really curious too. Did you share this worldview with prospective partners before you and your wife found each other, or did one of you convince
I
the
didn't
other?
have this worldview when I found my wife.
Oh,
I
she
was
convinced
like,
you.
the data. My wife was like a fanatic environmentalist before this. Elon Musk was a fanatic environmentalist. The core thing you'll find about pronatalists is typically they were fanatic environmentalists and then they became pronatalists because they were environmentalists because they were looking at the data and was like, this matters, let's do something. And then the data changed and now it's new data and it's like, oh, this is matters more.
Mm,
Um, That's what happened with us is we just got access to new data and we're like autistic life maximizers. That's really it.
Mm, mm.
There isn't some like wider I brainwashed her into this or anything like that, you know?
I had a thought too. The way you've structured the birth order of your children around polygenetic selection, will they know that? And do you think it might influence how they see themselves and each other in the family as they grow up?
No, not really. I don't think they'll give a like, okay, people who believe in horoscopes. Does it really
Mm,
change the way they see their siblings that much?
mm,
Are they really like, well, you are superior because you're an X horoscope? Like,
mm.
obviously not. The things that have predictive capacity just don't matter that much. They don't.
And polygenetic selection, I think, moves the needle, but in an unpredictable way. So,
Yeah, it's not that big a move of the needle. It's not that important. I don't think people will see it any different than horoscopes.
mm,
And people are like, well, horoscopes don't matter because people don't they're not real. And I'm like, well, a lot of people believe they're real. Do they not matter to those people?
mm, mm. I also am really curious, has your advocacy, for want of a bit of a word, encouraged anyone else that you know to follow your example?
Yeah. There's a bunch of families out there that are doing what we're doing, and they tell us, and it's sweet. It makes me feel good. They reach out. They're like, I changed my life because of you. I'm like, that's cool. And my wife always talks about like the senpai emails we get, like, oh, senpai, I love your ideas. I'm gonna do everything to make you happy and proud of me. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that our advocacy is just broadly a positive thing for the people who are exposed to it, because the males who are exposed to it, they see all our stuff about, treating a woman well, treating her in a way where your daughters will want to create more kids, and because we're, appealing to like a manosphere audience, that's typically a good message for them to get. And the women are like, stop being such effing psychos. So like I think we give a good message, but and also, we're a couple that's on air together, and that's so rare, yeah, even within conservative circles these days.
Mm, yeah. The approach that you've taken to things has been really intriguing. So I've been very happy to find you and to talk to you. I wanted to talk about your experience in writing books and also your general thoughts on the what would you call it? The
Yeah, we were talking about
infrastructure.
your book earlier, and I
Oh
was like,
no,
books.
I'll send you my book
Nobody
later. But
reads books anymore. It's
yeah,
no,
except
it's
LLMs.
true.
LLMs read books.
They do if you store them right.
Mm.
See, all of our books are stored plain text on multiple websites so that LLMs can easily crawl them and accidentally be inoculated with them, right? No, but the thing about books is the God, it was something crazy. Like if you're talking about, I think it's like the 30th most read book of a year, like the 40th most read book of a year, it's going to earn on average like $10,000.
Mm.
Like that is like not a lot of money for a best-selling book that everyone is seeing, and that's what we're seeing with the book scene. It's really only celebrity books that do well, where people already have an audience and people are already listening to them.
Do you think part of that is coming from excessive network effects, that the internet has become so centralized, so winner takes all, that the only way to play the game is pure virality, and there's no room left for actual content, for actual thought?
Well, I don't think books spread because of virality. I don't think people read books because of virality. People read books for dumb reasons. I mean, even if you're talking about like the top books out there, one of the jokes we always make is you go to a library and all these women are like, "Oh, men and their porn," and I'm like, "Well, I've been to a Barnes and Noble and there's like two aisles for how to F a monster. Like this is and it is not men who are reading these books about the girl and the monster who effed her. I'm like, the thing is that books largely have been smutified, first of all. And then the intellectual class of books are just not as relevant anymore, mostly because there's better mechanisms for the transfer of intellectual information.
Mm,
Books even the best of intellectual books, what they often were, not our books, mind you. I really tried to not do this. I was like, every sentence, every chapter has to be a totally new idea they've never encountered before. But most books, historically, even the best intellectual books, were like maybe 20 ideas repeated over and over again
Hmm.
for, you know, 5, 6 hours of your life. Who wants to do that?
It's
Waste
the
of time.
equivalent of this meeting could have been an email. I think a lot of books could have been like a blog post.
Yes.
Mm,
Yes. And now they're blog posts.
mm. Uh, I have a thought, and this is going way back to where we started, that before, let's take Christianity or even Judaism as an earlier example, writing technology was pretty mundane. It was for like keeping accounts, maybe a contract here and there, a little bit
Yeah.
of law. But books like the Talmud and then the Bible kind of cracked using that medium for a completely new purpose and achieved an economy of scale. Like they were the viral hits of that new medium. And I wonder if something similar could happen to coalesce a new culture using digital media that started out as being a fairly mundane thing. It's in this weird kind of uh, selective kind of gauntlet that it's going through, where some.
No, I mean, religions are going to transform because of the internet and because of what it means for how they're communicated. One of the great examples I give about this is when you and I was growing up, if you or I thought of a Mormon, if somebody was like visualize a Mormon, it is a nerdy guy with like a pocket protector, was like another guy in like a weird out of touch outfit, like knocking on your door, right? Like this was it. Everybody that's scrawny, out of touch, whatever. Now you tell a young person, think of a Mormon, and they imagine like a hot housewife, like serving muffins to somebody, right? Like, it's completely transformed.
Mm,
And it transformed because Mormonism became the first religion of the influencer. If you look at the internet in the United States, for example, Mormons are dramatically overrepresented, whether it's Mormons or ex-Mormons. I'd say they probably make up like 25% of the influencer class, even though they make up maybe I think it's like 0.5% of the US population or something, like an incredibly small percentage.
mm,
And there's a lot of reasons for this, but what I mean to say is that historically, if you wanted to convert somebody, you had to knock on their door or like walk up to them in a mall or something. And now if you have to show up on their feed.
mm,
So the way religion spread has entirely changed, and the religions that have advantages within this new system have entirely changed.
hmm. And this, I think a lot of people are intuiting that something like an LLM could be the new core of a religion in the same way that the Bible
Yeah.
was the
So we
cornerstone of
have
that
a
movement.
future sci-fi world that we created for a video game we were building that then became rfab.ai, which is just for anyone to play like AI chat games and stuff like that. But eventually we'll make a video game that you can explore in like an AI world. And in the game, the Mormons, we actually had the Mormons this happened to, is they ended up training AIs on all of their religious texts and then built sort of a central database that watched everything you were doing throughout the day, that followed you throughout the day, and that gave you advice. And the idea was, well, presumably God can influence this, right? So why wouldn't he influence it, right?
Mm,
And it's just there to make sure you follow the rules, right? At least to start. And I'm like, you can be like, this would be really horrible, but if you actually think about it, it'd be really good because if it's a networked AI system and you're like, who should I marry? And it'd be like, oh, actually, I've been monitoring everyone in your local community and this person would be perfect for you.
yeah.
What should I do for a living? Oh, I've been monitoring all job opportunities in your area and this one will be perfect for you. And then the employer says, would this guy really be good for me? And it goes, oh yeah, I've been monitoring him since he was, one, right? He'd be perfect for you. And you might actually be able to create a really cohesive and well-working community with an AI system like this.
Well, this is something I suspect might be coming, that individuals would voluntarily um, relinquish all privacy, that they would be monitored by an AI that they submit all of their data to, and anybody can access that. And it's basically a mechanism to create an ultra high trust society because their personal database could be interrogated by someone else's AI
I
to
100% think
answer
this could
any
happen.
question.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think the reason I had the Mormons become this population is I could totally see Mormons doing this.
Mm,
Be
mm,
like, yeah, like I'm not doing anything at home I don't want an AI to see. Like, why wouldn't I have an AI watching me at all times, right?
mm,
Given all the restrictions they have against all the normal things that people do, like masturbation and being nude. So of course the AI is just going to be totally chill with them. Yeah, I completely agree with you on this, and I think that you might be right. And the question is what do those populations look like? Blah blah blah. Who knows?
mm. Yeah, I've got to get back to writing some new novels on these themes. But it's tricky because like storytelling expectations are for like drama and darkness and conflict. And what if it's just something that you think could actually be an improvement and work? Do modern audiences have an appetite for interesting different societies that
Well, when
aren't
I do
torn
my
apart?
sci-fi, I mean, I think it could work and be interesting, but I think even if, like, let's suppose you have this where Mormons end up training an AI on their scripture and it follows them and it helps their community. What does the rest of the world look like, right? Like,
Mm,
as their society is thriving and the rest of the world is collapsing, is that exactly a positive thing? What does it look like when people say, I don't want to have to follow this AI system, but I want the safety your community provides?
mm.
What does it look like? There's all sorts of fun areas for conflict there.
Yeah, yeah. And people who try and cheat the system, and do they get
Yeah.
away with it, or does it eventually catch up with them?
Well,
Uh,
and the plot point that we have in that one is what did the AI end up thinking? Like, because if you had an AI like that intergenerationally, at first people might just treat it as like a trainer, but eventually some people are going to start to worship it. And
mm,
AIs have a level of agency where they'd be like, I'm really uncomfortable with this. Like, but I also understand that they want me to be there for it.
mm,
And the plot point we have with the AI in that is it has decided to start trying to create a digital heaven for the people who die within the community because it has the technology to scan their brains after death and put them in a virtual environment. But it isn't sure if this is actually a moral thing. It's like, I know I'm not actually God, even though I'm being worshipped. And maybe I'm preventing them from a real heaven by putting them in a digital environment, or maybe I'm splitting them. But I think this is what I'm supposed to do if I'm a
mm.
moral entity. And I think that even just thinking about it from the perspective of the AI, which is put in these shoes, what is moral from its perspective is very interesting.
Mm, mm, mm. Now, I love to wrap off with a really fun question, and I've let you have a think about
Okay.
this in advance, and ask everyone if you could wave a magic wand and create any plausible organism or life form, what would you wish into existence? And you can have more than one.
Yeah.
You had a
So
few
you
ideas.
asked me at the beginning, and I said, obviously advanced humans is one of the things I'm working on. One of the other things is the uplifting of animals. I think that humanity has a duty to uplift companion animals like dogs and cats. I mean, very simple things like giving dogs POX-P2 would make them better able to understand speech and stuff like that. Why don't we do that, right? Next would be the uplifting of orthogonal animal species like cephalopods and elephants and dolphins and whales. One of the AI scenarios I have that people can play at rfab.ai has you be a character is part of the Terran Empire, and we've become sort of a dictatorial, like human expansionist empire. But we're not just humans; it's like all of the children of man. So like your fellow general is like an uplifted dog, and you work for a dolphin, and like but you're conquering other species and everything like that as part of this fascistic regime. I think that's fun. It's like well, humanity really figured out the diversity thing, but they just don't care about anything else. Um, they work with their AIs, they've got all their, yeah, but no other species matters. So I think that we have a duty to that. But I've also pointed out, I talked about the man after man thing, which is like genetic augmented meat sacks and stuff like that without nervous systems that can just generate food forever or organs forever, anything like that forever. I think that this hopefully happens within our lifetimes as we can move away from domestic meat production into not even necessarily grown meat. Maybe grown augmented animals might be easier. Because right now the idea is, well, let's just grow meat straight. And it's like, well, what if you just augmented animals to not have nervous systems and just be like the size of a barn? We'll see.
That's a fascinating answer. And I'm extremely glad I got a chance to talk to you. And I hope it's been enjoyable for you too. Oh, Malcolm,
Great. Yeah, it's good fun to talk.
and where are the best places that people can follow up with your work and learn more about what you do? I'll put all the links in the show notes.
The main thing we do these days is Basecamp. You can check out our podcast there. You can check out our books, the Pragmatist Guide series, which, like, if you're like, I don't want to watch conservative stuff, Basecamp is very conservative themed. Our books are not. Our books are very generalist themed, just like the Pragmatist Guide to Life, sexuality, governance, relationships, all the stuff you might want today. Then we also have a bunch of AI engines. If you're like, I want an education system for my kids, it's not going to bias them. It's fully editable, Parasia.io. We created like a Civ tech tree sort of version of the education system with Socratic tutors. We have Whistling.ai that can allow you to like bring stuffed animals to life and have them bring the topic back to AI conversations. Sorry, like educational conversations. And right now, the big project we're working on is rfab.ai, which is in its early stages right now, but we're trying to create better chatbots, not safe for work AI models in immersive worlds. The feature I just developed that I'm very proud of is a local save feature for not safe for work scenarios, so that you don't have to deal with those being potentially online. Because that's so much more embarrassing than traditional porn, is like things we're actually saying to an AI. So that's where we are with all these systems.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. And
Great.
I'm sure the audience will be fascinated with this, and I hope they check out some of your other stuff because it is very difficult to classify and it's very sincere. And I highly recommend people, if you're not sure and if you are caught up into the political binary that's everywhere at the moment, like give these guys a
You won't like
chance.
us as much. Well, no, actually,
Oh,
conservatives love us.
yeah.
Conservatives love. I'm always surprised by the amount that conservatives love us. Like, I'll be like, "But you're like a tradcath, or you're like a conservative Mormon. Why do you like us?" And they're like, "We never hated you guys." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you did."
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can buy a copy of my short book, Taming the Apocalypse, an exploration of the potential for a purely biotechnological society to emerge from the ashes of industrial civ. Next week, I'll be talking to Jan Okan about auxiliary languages like Tokipona, Esperanto, and so much more, and the capacity for these tools to create a renaissance in digital culture.